Okay, I tell you what, let's go ahead and get started. We are recording things and this is just an introduction. So I think we'll be able to catch people um, up. So thank you for joining us for this webinar. This is the fifth session of our distance learning series, Ideas from the Field, where we're kind of recruiting people from different literacy programs who are sharing with us what they're doing to implement distance learning in their programs. And today we have Sasha, Luevano, and Milena Garcia from the Northside Independent School District in San Antonio, Texas. And just a little bit to kind of go over. We are recording things. You'll see or you'll receive a follow-up email on Monday. And in that email, we'll have a link to the recording of this webinar. We'll have a link to websites and different things that we share, other resources that we shared during the webinar. We'll have a certificate for those folks who attend. We will also, Sasha and Milena have agreed to share their PowerPoint slideshow. So we will have that available for folks as well. And that'll go out on Monday. We're going to ask that you use the Q&A functions and the chat functions to communicate. We have over 1,000 people registered for the webinar, which means we typically have between 600 to 800 people attending. So what we're going to ask you to do is, if you have content questions, we're going to ask you to use the Q&A feature to post those questions to us. My colleagues, Robin and Patty and myself, will review those questions and try to answer the ones that we can during the webinar. And then Sasha and Milena, their presentation is going to take about 30 minutes or so. And we'll spend the rest of the time with them asking them your questions that you've posted and getting responses. And they've been gracious enough to agree to stay on after the webinar is over so we can make sure everybody's questions have been answered. We'll use the chat feature to post links and to for you guys to let us know if you're having any technical issues. So if you're having trouble with your audio or your videos cutting out, you can post that in there and we'll try to help you solve that. Just a reminder, these are weekly webinars that we're trying to have every week. You should get an e-blast on Tuesday or Wednesday of that week, giving you the registration link for the upcoming webinar. If you've registered or attended any of our previous webinars, you're on that email list. So you don't have to worry. If you're here today, you don't have to worry. You'll get notification of the upcoming webinars. And here's just a few folks that we have coming up. A bunch of folks from Texas, and then we have Literacy Source in Seattle. Now we have these scheduled out for the end of June. At that point, I think we're going to kind of take stock and see if these are still helpful to people. If they are, we'll continue recruiting. And if not, we'll kind of look at what else we can do. And I see that somebody's posted a question about teaching in a prison that has no technology for students. And I will say, we were on a meeting the other day where one of the people in our meeting volunteered to do a webinar specifically about doing instruction in a prison during this COVID time. So we're working on setting up a webinar for that literacy program. It'll probably be in June, but we'll have one specifically on teaching in prison. So thank you for that question, and just know that that's coming up. Okay, the recordings are also posted on ProLiteracy Education Network. when you log in on the welcome page, you'll see a big banner across the top that says Distance Learning Resources. You can click on that banner. It takes you to our Distance Learning Resources section on Education Network. You'll see the recordings there. You'll also see links to other resources that we're posting. And now I'm going to turn things over to Sasha and Milena. Sasha is the Adult Education and Literacy Coordinator for the Northside, I forgot what the I stands for, Independent?
Yeah,
I apologize.
Northside Independent.
Okay,
Independent
School District. And Milena is the distance learning coach and the classroom instructor. And they're going to talk about how they use distance learning coaches to work with the teachers. I think that's really that was an interesting feature when I spoke with Sasha, is this idea of having distance learning coaches to work with the teachers. So I know you're going to enjoy their presentation, and I will stop sharing my screen. And Sasha and Milena, you guys can take it away.
Okay, Milena, you want to share your screen, and that way when you take over, you're good to go?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. My name is Sasha Luevano. I am with Northside Independent School District, and we are really happy to be here and kind of explain to you kind of the way that we do things and just share our thoughts, and hopefully you can get something out of it and take it back to your program. If you want to go to the next slide, Milena. We have, in our program, we are housed out of an independent school district. We serve about 1,200 students, and that's ESL and HSE together. Well, before COVID, we did everything out of a learning center. We had one building with 7 classrooms, and we just rotated. We have day, night, and afternoon and Saturday classes. All of our students before COVID were taught using a blended learning model. So they were already taught. For ESL, we use Burlington English. They were taught from Burlington English, and then the students had to complete 3 hours of proxy at home in addition to their class time. And for HSE, we used Skills Tutor and Tabe Tutor. And they had that same requirement. And it is a requirement for our program that they at least have the 3 hours a week proxy, or 12 hours a month, whichever is easier for them. Each of the teachers are given a Chromebook to check out at the beginning of the program year. I'm just noticing HSC is high school equivalency, sorry, GED programs. That's what we offer. The teachers get a Chromebook at the beginning of the year to, just so before COVID, they use the Chromebook to get onto different data management systems that we use here in Texas called Teams. We also give the process test for progress testing and baseline testing. So all of the teachers had access to that using their Chromebooks. They also had just different things. They could get onto Burlington, they could get onto Skills Tutor and prepare for their lessons. And once COVID hit, they were really glad to have that. They could continue learning or continue teaching. Go ahead and go to the next one there, Milena. So once COVID hit, now I put distance learning coaches as part of the changes. They were actually part of our program at the beginning of this school year. Just in general, we had the idea of a distance learning coach from a grant that we got to implement and to really build up the distance learning option for our students. So when we got the grant, we had distance learning coaches. And those coaches, Milena will go over a little bit about what they do, but before COVID, they were already in the process of getting in, watching teachers, and just kind of building in a distance learning undertone into everything that was taught. So if they were teaching on resumes, then what were different online options that were there for teachers? Once COVID hit, and we kind of had to stay home, their responsibilities became a lot more robust. We began to depend on them to teach them because of the different comfort levels that every teacher had. What teachers do and what technology they use, every teacher was a little bit different. So the distance learning coaches began to meet with these teachers, definitely did training on how to use Zoom. That's just what we use. They did some training about probably about 3 days of just constant training on different apps, different Zoom, how to use the breakout rooms, all those kind of things. And the other thing that I was really excited about switching over to completely online is it took away the walls. Using everything online allowed us really to bring students in who wouldn't have been able to been into a class before. As I stated, we're kind of one general location in a building with 7 classrooms. And so each of our classrooms, we can hold about 25 to 30 students. With the switching over to technology, we were able to take some of our students who had already tested, had already done registration, but we didn't have room for. We were able to call them and put them in classes right away. So this really took away the wall restriction or the seat restriction that we had. And so we got excited, the distance learning coaches and myself and our supervisor, that we could really build our classrooms, not from a seat standpoint, but just our classrooms could be as big as they wanted. And our teachers have really taken to that. Our classrooms either have stayed the same as far as students, anywhere from 25 to 30. In some cases, they've gotten a little bit bigger, and most teachers can handle that. We do have instructional aides. I have 9 instructional aides who kind of rotate the classrooms and help the teachers with different activities and with attendance, and making sure if the teacher wants to do a specific lesson or maybe a little game, the instructional aides can definitely help with that. So that is something that we have been truly blessed with, to have instructional aides to help with that. But we kind of went away from what our classrooms could suffice and just said, what can we do to help? And so we have really taken on this online learning through our distance learning coaches, and allowing the teachers to be able to be taught. Go ahead and go, Milena. So our distance learning coaches, and I have 2, Milena is just one. She does help teachers and students create accounts. They join the class. They use online platforms, download applications. They're teaching students and teachers how to use Zoom, Remind, Google Suite. They're kind of a little bit of everything. And here recently, we've actually implemented a distance learning telephone number. We use the Google phone or the Google number, so that if a student has some technical issues, they can pick up a phone and call one of our coaches, and the coaches, if they're available, they'll answer. If not, then they will call them back and try to get some technical help to make sure that the student is online, and that they're able to get online and to learn. They really are the point of contact for all of our staff and teachers to get online. I'm gonna hand it over to Milena, because she is a coach now, and how she uses that to help the teachers, and then kind of what her responsibilities are as a teacher, because we also have that as well. She is she's great at both. So I want her to be able to explain what she does as a coach, and then how she transitioned that over when she made the big step to go completely online, and how she did that. Milena, you ready?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, Sasha. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Milena Garcia, And I am, like Sasha said, I am one of the distance learning coach, and I'm also an instructor. And then just to have you an idea about my background, I have had different roles in this program. So first, like 17 years ago, I started as a student, and then I got hired as an instructional aide. Then I became a teacher, and now I am a coach. So I'm very proud of myself and all the accomplishments that I have reached in this fantastic program. Okay, so I am very happy to have this opportunity to share with you all my strategies as a coach and as a teacher too, to help you and your students to keep engaged in this new normal life that we have now. Now we are teaching online, so we need to be ready for that. Okay, so when you are a new teacher for online teaching, sometimes you have some expectations and then you can feel stressed. Okay, so, but if you feel, if you are prepared, if you are excited, then you can relieve that stress. Okay, so I know that is sometimes overwhelming to learn about new programs, platforms, applications, websites at the same time. And also you need to remember that you need to teach. So it is a lot. And I understand that. But I think that with my strategies, it will be a little bit easier for you to keep your students engaged. Okay, so let me check. Yeah. So first of all, and the most important thing for me is to build some relationship with students. Sometimes just listening is enough. So in my classes, students have the opportunity to tell me how they feel, how this situation has changed their lives, how what new things they have learned now that they are at home with their children. And I am really glad to hear that, to hear those stories and situations. So every class, the watermark activity is speaking. So they have to tell me and their classmates something that is happening in their lives, or if they need some help with food, with paying bills, many things. And then I believe that I don't have a class. We are a team. So we are there to support each other with information, or just with saying everything is going to be okay. Okay, so and I'm here to support you, to help you. So it is very important to let your students know that we are here to support them, to help them, and to tell them that everything is going to be fine. Okay, everything is going to be okay. Now for them it's very hard because they are far from their families. They are in a new country. So it's hard. So I believe that letting them express how they feel is very important to start the class. Okay, so now I'm gonna tell you how I prepare my classes, okay? So I schedule the meeting on Zoom, then I share the link on Remind. Then once my students have joined the class, I start with the warm-up activity. It is important for you to know that my classes last from 2.5 to 3 hours. And I have from 20 to 23 to 25, 26 students in each class. So in my classes, I think that they're fun because my students want to return to class the next session. My students dance. So I have some dancing activities. They are able to watch videos from YouTube, from any other website. I use the whiteboard from Zoom to explain some grammar. Sometimes I send them online quizzes so they can play and take quizzes while they're in class. And my favorite part is that my students love to introduce their families. They love to show me and show their classmates their houses, gardens, pets. So that is part of the class. Because I believe that at this time, now that we are living this difficult situation, instruction is important. Yes, it is. But it's very important to build relationship with them, and to teach them some technology skills. So I think that we need to focus now on those two things, and then absolutely in instruction. But for me, the most important thing is to build relationship with them. Okay, so I use the breakout room sessions on Zoom for speaking activities, for discussions, for writing activities, or sometimes if I notice that there is a group of students that who need more help, I group them in a breakout room session, and I join that room, and then I can help them directly, like a small group. So I really like this feature from Zoom because it allows me and allows them to speak, because sometimes when I have a big class, like 25 students, not all of them have the opportunity to participate. So sending them to breakout rooms give them the opportunity to speak and to feel more confident when they're talking. Like Sasha said, we use Burlington for ESL. So I teach from that platform. I teach from that from their website. So I complete the in-class lessons, but also I send them worksheets from Burlington on Remind. By the way, Remind is my favorite way of communicating with them. I use Remind all the time, not only for communication, but for sending them homework, pictures, motivational messages, many things. But I use them, now that you can see this slide, I use Remind to share some worksheets from Burlington, so they can have access to that beforehand, before class. So when they join the class, they know that they're going to be doing that activity, and so we can do it together in class. Sometimes I send them through Remind these kind of worksheets, songs, like lyrics, and then I send them before class. So when they join the class, they know that we're going to be singing that song, and they have to fill in the blanks with the words that they hear when I'm playing the song in class. So they love this activity. They love singing songs. Sometimes they suggest me, teacher, let's learn this song. So yeah, let's do it. So they send it to me, and I prepare the class with the new songs. I use a lot of applications in class. For example, I use Padlet for writing. I use Flipgrid for speaking. I use Actively Learn for reading. Now I found one of my favorite ones that is called Quill, and I'm still learning. That's why I didn't put it here on the slide, because I'm still learning, but I like it, and especially for writing. So sometimes we play games like quizzes, Kahoot, Quizlet, or some kind of just question games in class that I have. So my classes are very interactive. They know how to switch from one web page to another one on their phones or on their computers, because we use this every day, every class. So my classes are very dynamic and very, I change the activity every class. So they are always expecting new things that happen in class. So here I have two videos that I want to show you. One video is a short presentation of one of my classes. And the other one is how I incorporate music and dancing to start the class, especially when I know that I'm going to teach some topic in grammar that is hard or confusing. I prepare them, and I prepare their brains dancing. And I think that it works. They love that, and they learn. I think that they can learn easier when they activate their brains and their bodies. So I'm gonna click on the first video that is part of my class, so you can see how I incorporate all these activities in class. And I'm gonna be skipping them because I don't want to spend too much time in showing you my class. And I want you to let me know if you can hear it, okay? I'm sorry. Sorry. Hello students, good evening.
Good evening, teacher.
Hi, teacher.
How are you?
Hi. Good.
I'm fine. I'm very happy to see you one more time, and I can see your names on the chat window. Thank you for doing that. And we're gonna have a very fun class today, very interactive. You're gonna play games, you're gonna sing songs, many things, okay?
Come here.
So this is when one of the students introduced their
Samantha,
daughter.
come here. Samantha, say hello.
Hi, Samantha. How are you?
How are you, Samantha?
Good.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Yes.
Hi,
Bye.
Samantha. Thank you, Belinda, for showing us your daughter. She's beautiful, like you.
Thank you.
Let's start showing that this was the book. So this is Burlington. So I teach from Burlington, so we complete all these activities. I'm gonna skip the video until I play the game. So I play quizzes with them. .com, please, and join these quizzes. It's about colors. Remember the last week we were learning about colors?
Yes,
So go to quizzes and type the code. So when you use quizzes, you can see the leaderboard. So you can see all your students and then how many answers they have, how many questions they have answered. And finally, hold on. When they finish the game, I usually have some prizes, like virtual prizes to give them. Who the winner is? And the winner is Erica. Very good, Erica. So Erica, I have a prize for you. This is your bunny for Easter bunny. You have an Easter bunny. So when I see you face to face, I'm gonna give it to you, okay?
Okay, thank you, teacher. I like it.
Oh,
teacher,
okay.
can you send me more this activity because I need the practice at home for the
Yes,
color.
Oh, yes,
Thank you.
Sure, I will. Yes, yes, ma'am. I can send you more practice to Remind. So check your Remind. Like, share the screen. Here they are going to sing the song. Do you see the song?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
So let's play it, and then you are going to listen to it, and then try to fill out the blanks.
Darling, just dive right in. Follow my lead.
Okay, thank you. So I send them the worksheet before, so they have it ready on their phones, or they can print it out, and then you have to fill in the blanks with the words that they hear. And then finally, I want to show you, hold on, yes. This is one of the applications that I use for writing that is called Padlet. You see the screen? So that is
Yes.
the same that you can see on your. So they were writing about their daily routines, and they did it right in class, okay? So I send them the link on Remind, and then they use this app for writing. So they were explaining their routine. Also, finally, yeah, I use an exit ticket, like just asking them
I learned about
what they learned today. So they have to tell me, in order to leave, they have to tell me what they learned that day in class. So
some fruit is the price is too much for the others.
Very good. So you're comparing the price.
Yes.
Very good. Belinda, what did you learn today?
I learned today for supermarket and for the colors.
Very good. Thank you. Our class, and so that's it. That is part of my class. That's the way that I teach. So this is a very short version of my actual class, but I hope that can help you to see how I teach. Now I want to show you a 1 minute video about my dancing activity. Okay, so that is part of my routine. Finally, I just want to tell you that if you have a fun and engaging class, your students will be motivated to join your next session. I promise. I promise that that is going to happen. And I don't know if we have time for this game. Todd, if you want to tell me, I don't know if we have time or not. It's a very short.
Absolutely. We've absolutely got time.
Okay, so this is a quizzes game. It's exactly the game that I show you on the video. It's a 5 questions game, but I want you to share it, to play it. That way you can see how quizzes work and how you can use it in your classes. So if you please can go to joinmyquizzes.com on your phones or computers or iPads, and then use this code, okay? It's a 5 questions game about general knowledge. So let's see. I'm gonna wait for some students or some people to join, and I'm gonna start. Thank you. I have 1 participant.
Milena, it might take a while for all like 600 or so.
Well, what we can do, I'm gonna start, and then they can see it, or I can send you the link.
Perfect.
You can share it with them. Just I want to give them an idea of how they can do it in class. I'm gonna start now. It will take like 5 minutes, no less than 5 minutes. Okay, so I'm gonna start. So I ended the game because we don't have enough time, but here we have a winner, Ali, and I have a prize for you here. You don't see me, but I have a prize for you here, the way that I do it in class. So that's the way that I incorporate games and apps and videos into my class. Now, let me stop this. Let me go back. So finally, we are ready for questions, and yeah, we're here, ready to answer your questions.
Great. I think Robin and Patty have collected a couple of questions, so I'll let them go. I will say that was exciting, the game, and I'm very disappointed in my performance. So Patty, Robin, you guys go ahead, and then I will look for more questions.
Yes, there is a question, or several people have posted their question about how long are usually your classes? What's the length of your class time?
Every teacher is a little bit different. So most of them are going between 2 and 3 hours. Our Saturday classes before COVID were 4 hours long. And obviously 4 hours is a long time. So the 4-hour classes are being broken up. They'll have a 2-hour session from 9 to 11. And then, you know, they'll take like a 30-40 minute break, and then they'll have another 2-hour session. But most of the teachers are having it at least 2 hours. I do have a couple who are still, you know, they're still not as comfortable with all of the applications. You know, with as big a staff as we have about 40 staff members. Some of them still aren't comfortable, so we do have some doing an hour and a half to 2, but the majority are doing at least 2.5.
We also have a question about Remind. I know that was mentioned often. Could you talk a little bit more about what Remind is? Is it an app? And then one person wants to know if you prefer Remind to Google Voice and why.
Okay. We've been using Remind for quite a while. Right now, we do use just the free version that's out there. All of the teachers have a Remind classroom set up for each of their classes. And Remind is a messaging communication platform. You can use it web-based, you can use an app. The great thing about Remind that I really like is that the student doesn't have to have the app in order to get the text message. So they can still get a text message to their normal SMS message if a teacher sends it out. The great thing about Remind that I really like is that it's not just here are words. They can send out quizzes, they can send out worksheets, they can send out pictures or videos, they can send out Google Forms. I use it myself with my staff, so I have a Remind for all of my staff members. Anytime that we need to send out a mass information, if all of a sudden I need a sub, I send a Remind out, and then the person is, you know, is allowed to reply back to me. So that's why we like it. We use Google Voice for the phone calls. We haven't really used Google Voice other than now after COVID for our DL coaches, so that they have a phone number, so that the students have a phone number to use, since technically our offices are closed. So that's kind of how we use it right now. We prefer Remind only because we've used it for so long. We're very comfortable. Milena actually was recognized by Remind last year as one of the top teachers in the nation to use Remind, because she uses it for everything. You can send everything out in Remind. And again, the great thing is the students themselves do not have to have an app or pay for anything. If they just have a regular phone, they'll still get the text message from the teacher if a classroom changes or anything like that. So we just prefer Remind, you know, and it works out. The character limit doesn't, because there is a character limit, but we haven't run into any issues on that.
Can I add something, Sasha?
Sure.
One thing that I like from Remind is that you don't have to use your phone numbers. So
Right.
you don't have access to your phone numbers, you don't have access to their phone numbers. So it's through the application in it. Of course, it's free. We love free. Adult educators love free.
Yes, very true.
And
So-
just to piggyback on that, we had one person who just popped in and asked why you would use Remind, why you prefer that over email.
Oh, that's simply because we do have a lot of students, especially our lower level. It seems like a lot of them have a translation feature already built into their phone. So if they get a text message, it automatically translates for them. Emails aren't necessarily reliable in that sense. And then not every student checks their email as often as they do a text message. You know, if I get a text message, I usually check that right away, and we found that our students have the same thing. But an email, they kind of have to go into the application, check their email. But just to say, we do use both. If there is something that we need to get out to the students that it's okay, that there's not a quick turnaround, we do use email as well. So if we're using specifically like registration, we do get their email. We do send out registration forms via email. So we do use it. It's just that once they're in the classroom for direct communication between the teacher and the students, Remind seems to work better, and it's definitely quicker. And it gives access, even if students don't have a data plan, they can still get the text message.
Great. So I've got a couple of questions. So one is, Milena, you mentioned that you had an app that you haven't learned well yet, and we didn't catch the name of that app. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, I wrote it on the chat. It's on the chat. It's
Okay, quilt.org. Perfect.
Yeah, it's for writing.
For
So
writing.
Students
Great.
learn about capitalization, punctuation, combining sentence, everything about writing.
Perfect. And then we had a question about enrollment. So someone wanted to know what kind of enrollment you have. Is it open? Is it managed? Is it kind of closed for the session length? So kind of once your classes start, are the enrollment closed? And is it the same now that you're doing your full-on distance learning as it was before?
Okay. As far as enrollment, I would say it was managed closed. And what I mean by that is we have one big registration kind of at the beginning of the year, usually in about July, to start, to make sure all of the classes are full come August. But I'm sure, as you know, we do have turnover, students leave, family emergencies. So we do registration again, usually about September, to have, fill in those classrooms about October. Then we'll do it. They do progress testing, and then during progress testing, like I said, we use CASAS, and I really love the CASAS system and the way that it works. So it allows us to see when the student is ready to go into the next level. We do have 3 levels of ESL, our beginner level, which are, very basic, and then our intermediate, and our advanced levels. So if a student moves from basic to advanced in October or in November when they progress test, then they would start the new semester in the new level. So we also do a registration mid-year. And then we usually do one about March. We did one right before spring break. Unfortunately, with COVID, we weren't able to do as many as we wanted. So that's where we had some who did complete the registration but didn't go into a class. And once we switched over completely to remote, it was great that we were able to put them into a class now. So we do that kind of managed registration. As we switch over, I'm waiting on CASAS is in the process of getting everything ready for remote testing. So once they have been approved to do the remote testing, that's kind of what we're going to transition to. We haven't had any current new student registration right now, but hopefully we will be up and running with that come June. Our student enrollment form is all online. They don't share any PII. That information is received through an interview. So they fill out all the paperwork and then we do the interview. We're just going to incorporate that interview to be Zoom this time. Then we send out the forms using DocuSign that's encrypted. They will sign it, send it back, and then we can get the student into a remote class that will be starting off, hopefully, all fingers crossed, in June. Does that answer that question?
I think it does.
Okay.
I think that was a good answer.
There are actually several questions in regards to devices. So I wanted to ask you what they've been asking. For example, I know you mentioned that you provided Chromebooks to some students, but how are the other students connecting? Do they use their own cell phones? And also, how do you communicate or how are you working with students that don't have any devices or connectivity at all?
Okay. Now we have not handed out any to students. The Chromebooks were given to teachers. Before COVID, and I'll comment on that first. Before COVID, during our interview, that's one of the questions we would make sure that they had some sort of either a smart device, an iPad, or something at home that they could get online with, because again, we do have the 3-hour proxy requirement, or that they had internet at home. And if they didn't, no problem. We had 2 fully functioning computer labs that the student could come, that were open, and they would come in and do hours online. It was absolutely fantastic. So if a student didn't have internet, or they were they weren't tech savvy, we had a lot of students who were older, who didn't know how to use it. Well, they would come into our computer lab, and we'd have an instructional aide in there who would help them and get them online. It was really fantastic. That was the luxury of before COVID. After COVID, I'll be honest with you though, because we had a lot of our students were already having the 3-hour proxy, they had some sort of internet or device to use. If they don't have a computer, we do have, they can use most of their stuff through a cell phone. Burlington is completely mobile friendly, which is absolutely incredible. They just switched over to what they call Burlington Core, and it's incredible. So I absolutely love Burlington. I don't sell for them, but they are fantastic, and they have been great during this transition. Skills Tutor just changed over to have most of their lessons using a mobile device. So even if a student doesn't have a laptop or a Chromebook, they could still do all of most of the activities. I won't say 100%, but most of the activities. So unfortunately, we have had a few, and I'll say it's a very small percentage, who have said that they're not able to come to class because there's just absolutely no way. They have no internet, or they don't have any type of device at all. We've had very few students who have had that problem. I think that that's just the luxury of being in a city. We don't have a whole lot. As far as San Antonio is concerned, we are kind of smack in the middle. Northside is. We don't have a whole lot of rural areas that don't have internet at all. And the great thing, San Antonio has done a lot to make sure that there are hot spots around the city that a student could get internet publicly if they wanted to. As far as devices are concerned, because we are housed in a school district, if a student has a device that was given by the school district, the parent can use it. But that's kind of how that has worked.
Can you, just to piggyback on that too, can you explain, do all of your students have printers? So they have access to printers, and if they don't, then how are you handling the print piece?
No, they don't have to.
Okay.
Just like Milena's putting in there, they see them on their devices, and then they answer them either in a notebook or a text message back to the student. Or the great thing is, if you use something like a Padlet, excuse me, you write right on the application, so you don't need to print anything. I discourage that, and all because of that fact. I know a lot of my teachers don't even have printers right now.
Okay.
So we don't really do worksheets in that regard. We do them all digitally.
Can I add something to that answer, please?
Yep.
Yeah, if I assign the worksheet as homeworks, they can read them from their devices and then answer on their books. But if I use it during class, I use the annotate option from Zoom. So we can fill this out right in class using the Zoom features.
Yeah, that's good. And whiteboard, which is a Zoom feature as well.
Yes, I use the whiteboard too, yes.
And Sasha, a few times you've referred to proxy learning or to proxies. Could you explain to the group what you're referring to there, what that means?
Yes, a direct hour, what we consider a contact hour, is when you are live between a teacher and a student. Those are direct hours, contact hours. The proxy is anything that the student does at home, by themselves. That's just what we call it here, is proxy hours. That is away from a teacher. They are learning on their own via Burlington English or tape tutor, skills tutor, sorry.
So it's a designation for you to track total hours and then be able to separate them out between in-person hours and online hours, basically.
Yes, exactly right. Yes, they do get credit for that on our data management system, but it does have to be kept separate. So, they have to have so much in-person hours and so many proxy.
Perfect. We had a couple of questions about the kind of class size and student interaction, so I'll kind of combine them together. Sasha, you talked about the benefits of online learning and the ability to expand the number of people that have access to a class. It's not limited by the number of walls. So one question was, if you have like 20 plus students starting the class, do those same 20 students go the whole 2 hours or 3 hours, or do you have people that kind of drop in and out of the class during the session? And then the other question kind of related to that is, many students have little ones at home. It can be noisy and the little ones can kind of interrupt. As your class sizes get bigger, it seems like there would be more instances of those kinds of interruptions. So just how do you handle that?
Well, one of the things that we kind of implemented from day one was this digital conduct that we kind of implemented. The teachers show, hey, during this time, kind of separate yourself in a room to make sure that there aren't any distractions. But even with my own staff, when I have staff meetings, there's going to be interruptions. It just happens. And the teachers have been really gracious that, hey, if they have a baby, can they bring the baby? Absolutely. They just bring the baby and then they turn their camera off and they're muted. No problem at all, so that the student does not lose any time by having small children at home. So they just mute them, or they can mute themselves. We don't really do a break session. They do go for the full time period, other than the only exception to that is the Saturday classes, where they would normally go for 4. That's just really long to sit for a long period of time without a break. So usually my Saturday classes have been broken up in about 2 hours. Then they take a break and then they come back. And yes, it is the same amount of students who start the class and then end it. So that's kind of what we do there.
Thank you. So we've had a number of questions about digital literacy skills, so I'm going to combine them for you. So questions about whether your students, before they began these classes and before COVID, what degree of digital literacy skills did they have? How did you get them up to speed if they didn't have the skills? And how are you handling that whole piece?
Okay. Digital literacy, as far as, I'll speak first to before COVID. Before COVID, well, even after COVID, the technology goes from, as far as digital literacy skills for a student, goes from -1 or 0 all the way up to engineering skills. So they range all the way across. So before COVID, the student, of course, had the ability, we do in the beginning part of our syllabi, the first 6 weeks or so, we cover digital literacy, because that's the biggest chunk of our students that are there all at once. And then as we go through, we kind of do a reminder. So in August, that's when our normal calendar would start. Now, whether that will be next year, I'm not sure, but that's what we would do, about 4 to 6 weeks on just digital literacy. And then we'll do it again in January, another 2 weeks for new students and for students who have been with us in the past. So we kind of get them up to speed. But as we've had new students after COVID, what we did was when COVID hit and we started doing remote classes, that first week was just about the teachers teaching how to use Zoom, how to get into different applications. They weren't really teaching GED and or English. They were teaching remote digital skills. Now, again, this is where Milena and Karen is the other distance learning coach, became absolutely invaluable. They were in each classroom helping students. If there was a student who, everybody else was getting it, but we had one or two who just couldn't wrap their head around, well, that's where either Milena or Karen would reach out to that student one-on-one and help them get to where they needed to be as far as digital skills. So what we're going to do also is at the end, we're going to start a new session for us for the summer classes, which I'm actually really excited about. We've never been able to do this, but because of the remote option and because there's no limit on students, we're going to do a pronunciation conversation class for our ESL and a GED readiness course for our GED students. And what that's going to function is we're going to have a bunch of students who are just going to learn just that. And those skills are going to be absolutely incredible using remote learning. And so what we're going to do for those students is the week before the class starts, we are going to have several digital literacy classes, which Karen and Milena will be teaching. It'll be a kind of a general session. We'll have one for our very, very beginners. And we do have beginner students, specifically ESL, who are learning digital literacy and English at the same time. And those take a little bit more care to just kind of guide them through, but we'll have sessions for them the week before for them to come in, digitally, of course, remote learning, and getting to know their devices. The other thing is Burlington English for our ESL students built into their curriculum already has an absolutely incredible digital literacy section. So we have all of our students go through that and go through that part of the curriculum. And so that really, really helps. The curriculum is already built in. Most of our HSE students have the ability and the know-how to get on to digital literacy in some capacity. They have a smartphone or an iPad that they've used for Facebook or WhatsApp. So I would say that as far as our GED students, the majority of them have usually slightly higher digital literacy skills. We do have some of an older crowd sometimes who don't have that. And we just take some extra time with them. Milena and Karen have been great using the Google Voice to answer those questions directly, and then set up Zoom meets with students who need that extra care. And we've actually worked with their kids. So if let's say that, mom, grandma doesn't know how to get onto the internet, well, let me talk to whoever's in the house. Maybe it's a son or a daughter or a grandson. Let me show you what they should be doing, and then they can help. So it really is, I'm really glad that Milena, it's more than a class, we're a team, we're a family, that we help each other, and we use whatever resources we can do that.
Great. Let me actually, Milena, if you can stop sharing your screen for a minute.
Sure. Sorry.
And, no, you're fine. Let's see. And then I want to share this. So we are at the top of the hour. So I just want to let folks know that at this point, we will kind of stop the webinar. We're going to continue to ask questions of Milena and Sasha. They've been gracious enough to stick around and make sure everybody's questions get answered. We will continue to record that. So when we send out the recording, it's going to have the answers to all the questions that people have asked, even if you have to get offline now and go do something else. For those of you who want to stick around and listen to the responses, you're free to do that. We're going to cut off the question asking. Otherwise, it could go on all day. And but thank you again for attending these. We hope they've been helpful. Seems like from the chat they have been. So just thank you again. And once again, thanks to Sasha and Milena for a great presentation. So we'll let folks sign off, and then we'll go ahead and continue to ask questions. Patty, I think you had a question for them.
Yes, Todd. I do have a question about security issues, if any of them have come up. And also, how do you go about getting permission from the students to be recorded on Zoom? Do you have any waivers, or what do you do to get the student permission? And in general, if you had any security issues?
Okay. We did not have any Zoom issues when it first came out. Now we just make sure that all of the teachers have upgraded their Zoom feature. They're still using a free version, but that all of the updates have been completed. Now that the updates have been completed, Zoom has done a really good job as far as putting those in place. I make sure that all of the teachers have a password for their class. None of them go in without a password. And they use the waiting room feature to let students in so they know exactly who's coming into their class. It's not just guessing. So that part is done. And what was the other question on Zoom? I'm sorry.
About having waivers from the student.
Oh, having they just noted at the beginning of the class, it just states that they are being recorded. They see in the top left, and teachers are just allowed, they just tell them, hey, if we're being recorded, if you don't want to be on, just turn your camera off. No problem at all. We don't make it a rule that they have to turn their camera on, but they do know. I mean, Zoom is very good about on the top left corner. Everybody
Can I add something to that, Sasha? For these two videos that I attached to the presentation, I asked them,
Right.
okay, do you want to participate? Actually, if you see the class video, it was only 5 students, because I took the students that wanted to participate in this like fake video or something like that to show you how I teach. So I have the permission from them.
Yeah, those are a little bit separate because those were specifically done to train our teachers and to train some other people within our consortium. So that those were given, they got special permission that yes, we're recording. But just so you know, all of our classes are recorded. Our teachers record their classes and then they place them into a Google Classroom so that we can go back and watch. But that's all secure as far as it's secure within the safeguard of the district has those walls in place so that we can keep those on record.
So Milena, I have a question. Just a couple of people are wondering, how do your students manage doing a Zoom classroom and then taking the quiz? Do they have to have a separate device? Do they just go back to the home screen and open up a browser on their phone or the quiz app or something like that? Like, what are the mechanics of bringing those additional apps and websites into the classroom?
Okay, so most of my students use only their phone. So since I sent them all the links through Remind, so they receive the notification when they are in class in Zoom, they receive the notification on Remind. So they go to Remind, they click on the link, and that link takes them to the page. So that's why I don't like to play a lot of Kahoot, if you're familiar with Kahoot, because with Kahoot, they have to go back and forth to read the question and answer like this. So this application that I use, they stay in the game or the activity until they finish and they come back to Zoom. So they don't have to be going back and forth, but they need to know how to go to the new tab. Yeah, they have to know that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Earlier you mentioned personally identifiable information, or PII. We do have a question specific to New York State, but in a more broad sense, what regulations are you bound by? Do you have, are the companies and the apps that you're using, do they comply with PII regulations that some states are bound by, and has that been an issue with you? Can you address that topic in general?
Yeah, in general we can. You know, just like Milena said, adult education, we like free. And so most of the free apps that we get really don't require anything from the student other than a name and or an email. So, and in most of the situations, it's really a fake username that the student could put in. The only thing, even on Burlington English, we set up a username and a generic password, so there's no PII there. So that in that regard, that's not an issue. The only PII that may come into question would be during registration, but during registration, it's one-on-one. There's not, it's not like a group setting. And that's when we verify, is this your, address? Is this your date of birth? And then the student signs it. That information is never out via remote or digital anything. That is one-on-one on paper, other than right now, because of COVID, when we do start to do new student registration, we will be using DocuSign to verify the information that's received during a face-to-face Zoom. So during an interview, the individual, my staff member, whether it's an IA or a teacher, will be looking at the student. The student will show their ID via Zoom. Yes, we are looking at that person. We will verify the information that they sent via the student enrollment form. Yes, that is yours. The teacher will then verify that's the information that is on there. And then secure it, encrypt it in DocuSign, send it back to the student via email. And if you're familiar with DocuSign, the student it's a fake real signature as best as can be possible with a mouse and a mouse pen. And then it's sent right back to us. And once we're able to get back into the office, then it's printed and secured in a file. Right now, those are not being printed anywhere. They're simply saved within the confines of our secure network through the district. They have enough walls in place that everything is secure, just like a K through 12 student. So that is kept right now. And then once we are able to get back in, it's printed and locked up. But we are not printing anything as far as that has any type of personal information. We're not getting copies of IDs or socials or anything like that.
I noticed there has been a lot of interest in the chat, people saying that they'd be interested in learning a lot more about your registration process. It sounds like it's very well put together. So maybe that's something we could keep in mind for the future.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, it is pretty robust. We here in Texas, I know that we have a lot of stipulations as far as what we have to do with a registration and forms that have to be filled out. And I know that those are different. Every state is different on what is required and whether they need a social or an ID, or every state is going to be different on that. So just take that into account. That's kind of that way that we have to do things here in Texas, with a very long student enrollment form with an interview and those kind of things. And they work out great. That builds relationship from minute one with the students.
Sasha, there was a question early on, just a little bit about the demographics of your students. Are they mostly Spanish speaking, or do you have a variety of kind of native languages that people speak, or kind of what's that makeup?
It's everything.
Okay.
And we in Northside, in San Antonio, we have multiple school districts like any large city would, and Northside is one of the biggest for refugee families. So we have them students from all over the world. We've got Congolese students, Spanish students, we have French students, German, Russian, any of the Arabic countries. We have Iran, Iraq, Armenia. I mean, you name it. It's a wide variety of student base that we have. So we use Google Translate a lot to help with that. during that interview process, we copy and paste. Well, when we were face to face, we would copy and paste and help them read it in their language if we had questions or comments. So yeah, we got real familiar with Google Translate because of that fact.
Great. And then there are some other questions around like your program. Do you use paid teachers, volunteers, a combination? Are you state funded, like adult education funded from the Department of Ed or whoever runs it in Texas, or non-profit? Are you a nonprofit? Some questions around that. They're just trying to get a sense, I think, of the funding requirements and probably the reporting requirements that your organization has.
Yeah, we are federally funded through Texas Workforce Commission, or grant funded, I should say, through the adult ed federal funds, all the way around. So we are part of a 9-member consortium, which includes all of the school districts and one nonprofit, but we are not considered, I guess, a nonprofit. We're technically considered a school district. And all of our teachers are paid to teach. Like I said, we have about 35 to 40 to teach, and then we have 9 instructional aides, which includes data clerks and secretary bookkeeper. All of them are part-time. The only full-time that we have are myself as the coordinator and the supervisor liaison, who works primarily with the teachers to do PD and that kind of stuff. We are the only 2 full-time individuals. Everyone else is part-time, but they do get paid. It's not a volunteer type situation.
Okay, perfect.
We do have a request too for your digital conduct expectations that you referred to. Is that something you would be willing to share?
Sure. Yeah, it's a flyer. We'll definitely, I can put it in the, when I send that over to you, I'll put that flyer in there.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Perfect. We had another question. I think this is probably for Milena, or maybe for both of you. Just how much prep time is required for each of your sessions? So Milena, I think you were saying, or Sasha, one of you were saying, typically it's a 2-hour session. So how much prep time goes into that?
Well, okay. Milena, I'm going to let her answer first, because her prep time is probably a lot less. I don't know if it's less or more, but Burlington English is really good about that. So I will talk about that part of it, and Milena can tell you how she does it as far as prep. But every teacher is going to be different, and I'll just say that right up front.
Well, I think it changes, depends on the activity I am planning to do in every class. We as a teacher, we are always like thinking about what we can do during class. I would say my classes are Monday and Wednesday, for example. So I would say that I spend like 1 hour for each class, or let's say 2 hours a week, preparing the classes and the activities. But my extra activities, because if I just teach from Burlington, everything is there. See, so all the activities are there, so we don't spend a lot of time. But because I add a lot of different apps and activities, I would say that I spend like 2 hours a week to teach, to prepare my classes.
And I'll just add to that, our teachers are paid for prep. So if they have if our classes are 2 days a week, the majority, and before COVID, each class was 3 hours long, and they got an additional hour to prep for every class that they were given. So it was a total of 7 hours of paid time for each class. And we just continued that after COVID. Some teachers take a little bit longer for prep because they're not as tech savvy. But just like she was saying, the fantastic thing is, because we were completely blended before COVID, they were completely, they know the curriculum. So, and we have a year-round syllabus that they know ahead of time this. So even though COVID hit, we knew exactly where we were in that point in the year, that it was just a matter of picking up the new digital tools to continue the syllabus. And I have to rave again about Burlington English. The way that their curriculum is set up, the teachers really do have it made. There is a syllabus, there is a lesson plan already built, external activities that the teacher can use. So that's fantastic. Skills Tutor doesn't have that as much, but because we've already built in the syllabus, the GED classes are already, they know where they're at. And as far as math and language arts, all they have to do is kind of pick up where they are. So they teach directly from TABE Tutor, which is the literature portion of Skills Tutor. Skills Tutor is what the students go home and do. They do 3 hours, just like ESL, of practice. They can do it in any of the 4 subjects: language arts, math, science, or social studies from Skills Tutor. And they do that online. The teachers just teach from TABE Tutor, and then the students go home and do Skills Tutor. And they do that every week. So when we changed over, they knew exactly where they were in Skills Tutor, TABE Tutor, and what book and chapter and level, because TABE, if you give the TABE, you have the 4 levels. So they knew exactly where they were. All they had to do was do about a week, again, of just a class or 2 of digital literacy, and then we were right back onto the continued syllabus through the year, which we will end here the week of June the 6th.
So that actually brings up, I think, several questions that we have, and I think I'll just kind of check in with these. So you use Burlington English with your ESL students, correct?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
And that's a paid subscription?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay. And then you're using your TABE Tutor and your Skills Tutor with your GED and high school equivalency classes. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And kind of the basic functioning of those classes works the same. They're held on Zoom, 2-hour classes, that sort of thing. Or are there any differences in how your ESL classes are structured and your high school equivalency classes are structured?
No, there's nothing like that at all. Our GED classes function just like our ESL classes. There's really, other than the curriculum difference, and we do give the CASAS for both. Both the ESL and the HSE take HSE, that's high school equivalency, and that's because here in Texas they can take either test. Mm-hmm. We do give the CASAS test, which allows them to do both, and the correlation between CASAS and TABE and Skills Tutor and Burlington English work really well. So
okay. And then you said that you spend like I think you said you have a big registration in September, and you spend like the first 6 weeks or so on digital skills because your students are using those online pieces at home. So it sounds like the way your program is structured, you kind of run from a fall to spring year with maybe separated into semesters. Is that correct?
Well, we build our calendar year long because we do follow the Northside calendar.
Okay.
However, we have, I call them academies. So we'll have every 6 weeks, we change subjects. So the first 6 weeks that we have digital literacy. And then the next 6 weeks, we are covering community involvement. And so what that does is it gives consistency between ESL and GED. So it doesn't matter what classroom I go into, they're covering that subject matter in their subject. So if we're covering community involvement in a math class, that's what's being covered, by ESL.
Okay.
So
I see.
That's kind of how that goes.
And then out of your 1,100, 1,200 students, how many of them are ESL and how many of them are HSE?
I would say it's probably it's definitely a bigger ESL group because again we have a large refugee, but I would say it's about a 70 or a 75 to a 25 to 30 split.
Okay. Let's see. So one other question: do you use Google Classroom or Google Forms at all?
We use Google Form. We do use Google Forms for several different things, surveys and those kind of things. We don't use Google Classroom platform only because the district, because we're housed within Northside, there's not a way to keep the firewalls up as far as for our students because they're not considered Northside students. They don't have like a student ID and those kind of things with the district. So we don't use any type of platform, but we are in the process because of this change of trying to find a classroom platform like Edmodo or Blackboard that would allow us to be more consistent on how things are being put together. So I do want something like that. We just haven't had it in the past. We do have teachers who use Google Classroom on their own with their own Google account to kind of keep things together. I know that Milena uses Edmodo with some of her students. So we do have them. It's just unfortunately we haven't gotten to the point where we have the same one for every classroom. I'm hoping to implement that next school year.
Perfect. And then we've got two more questions if you guys still have time.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Do your teachers have TESOL certifications that, your teachers that are teaching, do they need those TESOL certifications or are they just kind of have a background in ESL instruction?
Neither actually. All of our teachers have to have a minimum of a bachelor degree. They don't have to have a TESOL necessarily. They do, so at least the bachelor's, they do get paid more if they have a master's or if they have a teacher certification. So we do, and I'll tell you the majority of my teachers do have either a master's or a teacher cert. I think I only have 2 current teachers who have bachelor's degrees, but they do have bachelor's degrees in some sort of education.
Perfect. And then last question, do any of your ESL students, are they looking for academic English? And if so, how do you approach that instruction? Does Burlington English address academic English?
Well, what do you mean by academic English?
So they might be looking to go into like a college, a community college or something like that. So they're not looking for kind of what would typically be survival English, getting around in your community, but more, essay writing and some things like that.
That's a great question. And I'll tell you, all of our classes are built that way. All of our classes are built with the intent that the student is looking for higher education or to get a better job. So we incorporate essay writing, resume writing, searching for a job in every classroom. And the great thing is Burlington is already built that way. So from our very basic level, we do have a section. As a matter of fact, we're in it now. It's career exploration. That's kind of the 6 weeks that we're in. So even our very basic students are learning what a job application even looks like. How do they do it online? What is a social? And then you get all the way up into our GED students who now is the time to start looking at scholarships and applications. Are you ready to take the GED? And the other individuals that we have on hand hired, as I have 2 career navigators. They are on staff. They're, again, part-time, and they visit with the students on a one-on-one basis to help them guide them into their next steps. So that works really, really well. They also have, they meet a lot. I would say that the majority of their students are our higher level ESL. We have so many students who have their degrees in their country and unfortunately can't use it here because of that fact. Their English just isn't ready yet. So we really try to hone in on those students to get them what they need to bring their their paperwork over, or to make sure that their English is ready for something like a TOEFL if they're going to need to take something like that. So we have the levels of ESL, right? Beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And then of course you have our GED classes, and they do bridge from advanced ESL over to GED into that language arts. But we also offer intense language. It happens 3 times a year. And we offer the first part, it's a 7-week course. The first one is writing, and they focus specifically on higher level collegiate writing. The next one is reading and reading comprehension. And then they're currently in the section of speaking, and they will do speeches and stand up and practice all of that. And then we have our summer classes where we're going to focus on pronunciation, higher level English, and phonetics. And then our GEDs will focus on that essay that they have to write for for their GED, and that higher level math that they have to do to pass that test. So that's kind of how we kind of do all of that. So we do focus a lot on the academic English, more than the conversational English.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So Sasha, Milena, thank you. That's all the questions we had. You guys did a great job. Again, very good reviews in the chat. Thank you so much for taking an hour and a half out of your day and all the prep time that you guys spent preparing this webinar. It was really helpful for people. Thank you so much.
Oh, you are so welcome. So welcome. And if anyone has any additional questions, feel free to shoot me an email or Milena an email.
Great. And we will, that was included on the slide, so it'll be in the presentation, but we'll also include your contact information on the resource sheet that we share with people. So
Okay.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for attending. Everybody have a great weekend.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.